So this session is primarily to give a flavor as to how the CISA exam questions would be. That is a primary intent of it. So to look for how you need to read the question and understand it. So I'll be taking this session. So I'm Ashwini Srinath. To give a big background about myself, I'm a chartered accountant. I had been associated with InfosecTrain for close to 6+ years. Started my journey as a student, starting with CISA journey, and later point in time, at present, involved in training with InfosecTrain for CISA and CIRISC as such. Yeah, so that's a brief background about me. To get started, so in the CISA examination, yeah, which is conducted by ISACA as an online examination, the primary thing which we noted is that people are strong enough in their concepts. Yeah, but when it comes to attempting the question, they are lacking because of lack of the expertise on how to read the question, how to understand the question, and how to approach each of the question in the examination. Yeah, that's where people struggle on. So these sessions are primarily intended to guide the participants as to how they need to read the question, understand it, and then need to attempt the question. Okay, so it is not as simple as that. Let's not take an objective based question so easily. It needs a lot of conceptual understanding as such from attempting the options. Yeah, in fact, the subjective question would be more easier to attempt rather than a objective based question, because it is either right or wrong. Yeah, you either get the full marks or lose the marks. Okay, so now to get started, I have not introduced anything much on the introduction part. I straightly go to the question directly. But before in hand, I want to discuss with you people as to how you need to align your mindset from an auditor perspective and how you need to approach a question. There is a specific methodology by which the questions needs to be approached. Okay. Now, so when you read a question, so you'd have, fondly heard about this statement when you are preparing for CISA examination. Think like an auditor perspective. The primary thing is on the mindset, because we had been engaged into an organization in multiple roles. You will be playing a project manager's role. You will be playing a role of related to information security. So that you will be engaged in different roles. But for the examination, you need to forget whatever the roles you are in, and you need to think only from an auditor perspective. Yeah, so that is the primary starting point of attempting the question. Second thing which you need to go through is on how to attempt the question and what are the stages that are involved in it. Okay, first, read the question. Should someone guide you on to read the question? Yes, it is important, because normally people don't read the question properly. They look for the options directly rather than looking for reading the question. Look for the stage of question. This is very important, because question speaks about what is the next step, what is the action that needs to be taken. Yeah, what is the next scenario which, or next step which needs to be taken. Look for the stage of the question, because your answers will differ based on the stage of the question, what stage they are looking for. If you consider auditing, there are multiple stages there. You are at planning stage, you are at execution stage, you are at the reporting stage. Your answers will differ, and sometimes it will not be on face of it available on to the stage. You need to find out based on the scenario. Okay, look for the stage of the question. Identify the keyword in the question. Identify the keyword. What is the keyword we are speaking on? First, best, next step, primary, most important. All these are the keywords, yeah, which you need to identify what they are looking for, or greatest. All these are the keywords, yeah, which you need to look for in the question, what exactly they are asking for. So identify these keywords. Then comes the most important point, which is related to elimination method. Elimination method is very important. Every question will have option A to D. One is the right answer here. You cannot directly choose for an answer. There is a reason why a specific option is wrong. But in the examination, you're not going to document on the reason why an option is wrong. You're just going to pick one question. But understand it, it is not very easy to eliminate each of the options, but it looks very similar. All the options will look similar. So you need to have a strong conceptual understanding for eliminating each of the options. So keep eliminating options with the right justification in your mind. And finally, choose for two options out of which, based on your strong conceptual understanding, look for the one right answer. This is very important one. It looks very lengthier, but as you practice the question, this becomes a practice. This is the way you will attempt the question. So now finalize on the right answer. You will be there. So when you practice these questions, you will know or understand where you are lacking, which stage you are lacking. Are you in a hurry to read the question? Are you not having the conceptual understanding right? So you will be able to judge yourself where you are placed. Okay, so this is how ideally the questions to be attempted. So we have around 10 to 11 questions to address it. Okay, now let's get started. Let's look for how you are able to attempt the question and get through. Okay, so let's get started with the first question. So the expectation is you are going to follow this approach. Now, a mid-sized manufacturing company uses a legacy ERP system where user roles are limited. Due to system constraint and small finance team, the same employee who is responsible for creating the vendor, processing invoices, and approving the system. Management is aware of this limitation but has not redesigned the system due to cost constraint. Instead, they have implemented additional measures such as periodic independent review of transaction log, monthly management review of vendor master changes, exception reports reviewed by the senior manager. During the audit, IS auditor evaluates whether the risk arising from lack of segregation of duty is effectively managed. In this scenario, which type of control should the auditor primarily looking for? Overlapping control, boundary control, access control, compensating control. So you are expected to understand, identify, do all the steps, then justify yourself what each of the option mean, then eliminate it, find the right answer. Fairly in the examination, it is a 4-hour examination with 150 question. You will have around 1.5 minute per question. Yeah. So time will not be a constraint in the examination. Look for, understand each options and finalize on one right answer. Yes, as you can see it from the question, right? It says that there is a lack of segregation of duty in the organization because of a cost constraint, right? So we cannot establish a segregation of duty in the organization because there is a cost constraint in it. But I want to genuinely want to follow the control, but there is a cost restriction on it. So what as an organization they have done? They have other ways of an approach. They have additional controls which is established to compensate the failure of the original control. So the controls which as an auditor should question on, is there any additional control like a compensating control to ensure that the SOD policy has been followed, though we don't have a separate principle being followed. So that is what is called as a compensating control. So if you look for it, it is not enough just to understand what is a compensating control. You as well need to understand what is the overlapping control, boundary, and access control. Restricting access to a physical or a logical environment is your access control. The question doesn't speak about it. Overlapping control, one particular risk is addressed by two different kinds of a control. Yeah, multiple controls for the same risk. That is overlapping control. Boundary control is establishing a boundary. Yeah, either at the start of a transaction or the end of the transaction, you have a check, control check, which is called as a boundary control. So like this, you need to understand the same. But while you practice the question, these are some learning that you can go through so that if there is any question related to overlapping or boundary control, you will be able to attempt the same. Okay, clear? Just put in a thumbs up if you have answered it right and able to understand the concept. Moving to the next question. During audit of a financial application, the IS auditor discovers that multiple employees in the operations teams are using a shared user ID to access the system. The system logs show transaction performed using this shared ID, but it is not responsible to identify which individual user performed a specific action. Management explains that shared IDs are used for convenience during the shift operations and assures auditor that no issues have been identified or occurred so far. Auditor notes that this practice violates accountability and traceability principle. What is the most appropriate action for the IS auditor in this situation? Inform the audit committee of the potential issue. Review the audit logs for IDs in the question. Document the finding and explain the risk of using shared ID. Request the IDs to be removed from the system. Yes, as well you need to review it. Review the audit logs and ID of question. And in such a case, yes, as you have, this is one of the observation that you have noted. you need to bring it to the knowledge of the senior management or audit committee that there is a potential violation. Correct? So eventually I've taken all the options, which is right. So if you look for the keywords over here, okay, keywords over here is more on most appropriate action to be taken by the auditor in this situation where there is a violation for accountability and traceability issues. Okay, action is that as an auditor. Okay, what is the action that you need to do? So, as part of the audit, you will have the planning stage, you will have the execution stage, you will have the reporting stage. Okay, and execution stage is done. We have identified that there is a shared ID which is being used, there is an observation, there is a deviation you have noted. Okay, final appropriate action is more on the reporting part. Request the IDs to be removed from the system. Can an auditor do? Cannot do. This is from an auditor perspective. Auditor cannot take a decision. Auditor can only give a best recommendation or a qualification as to what needs to be done. Cannot perform anything as part of an organization. D is not the right answer. Inform the audit committee of potential issue. No, we are at appropriate action level. It is not at the discussion level. So we are at the level, and even in such case, we will be discussing with the audit committee. Reporting will happen only to the board of directors. Okay. Then review the audit logs in question. Yes, again can be done. This is at the execution stage, not at the action stage. At the action, we have already performed and we have identified that shared IDs are being used. We are not able to establish the accountability. Accountability, a shared ID is used when some change is done. You are not able to establish as to who has made the change. You are not able to trace who has made the change. So you need to document the finding and explain the risk of shared IDs as part of your audit report. So C is the right answer here because the keyword speaks about most appropriate action from an auditor perspective and related to your accountability and traceability. So planning has already been done. It is executed. We have found the issue. Now we are at the reporting stage on it, right? So that's the reason C is the right answer here. Review the IDs in question and the document the same. Yeah. Document the finding and explain the risk of a shared ID. That is what is a primary role of an auditor. So like this, you need to understand, read the question, identify the stage and the keyword, keep eliminating with the right answer. Okay, with the justification, find the right answer. Okay, now moving to the next question. Which of the following should be considered first when assessing the risk in the organization? Understanding the organization's threat vulnerability associated with the assets of organization, understanding the business objectives and risk culture, determination of risk management priorities based on potential consequences, risk mitigation strategy sufficient to keep the risk at the acceptable level. So there is a confusion. Can you notice? Yeah, there is A or B, right? Which is A or B. What is the keyword here? Keyword is assessing the risk. Yeah, assessing the risk is the keyword here. If you look for it, it is not on risk management. As part of risk management ISO 27005, if you look for the steps that is involved, it starts with understanding the business objectives. Then the next step is understanding what are the assets related to your business objective. Then the third step is only risk assessment, whereas part of risk assessment, understanding the threat, vulnerability, risk profile of the organization is the first step onto the risk assessment. If you look for it, it does not ask from a risk management perspective. It is on when you assess the risk, what is the first step? So keyword is on first while assessing the risk, which is on related to A. B is the first step for your risk management cycle. Okay, that's the reason where A is the right answer here. Okay, so able to get it. This is how you need to look for it and identify the keywords. It will not be very much straightforward on it. Okay, now next question. While auditing the proposed acquisition of a new system, information systems auditor should first ensure that clear business case has been approved by management, corporate security standards will be met, users will be involved in the implementation plan, new system will meet all the required user functionality. As you can see, right, there is always a confusion between two of the options. So as part of the acquisition of new system, the first step as part of the project management cycle is to understand the business case, the why part of it, why we need a acquisition or why we need a new system, understanding what is the stakeholders expectation. So understanding the business case is the first step over there. Understanding whether that meets with the security standard is on evaluation of the project, which comes at a later part in time when we plan for the project. First is looking for the requirement, yeah, why we need the project, which is understanding the business case. So clear business case has been approved by the management. It starts from there. So A is the right answer over there. So this is part of your domain 3 related to your project management topic. Okay. So that's why you need to be conceptually clear on your topics and your understanding so that you are able to apply the same in the scenario. Okay. So A is the right answer here. We will move to the next question. An information systems auditor is reviewing organization's recovery from a disaster in which not all the critical data needed to resume the business operations were retained. Which of the following was incorrectly defined? Interruption window, recovery time objective, service delivery objective, recovery point objective. So as you can see it in the confusion, right? Confusion is between B and D. Okay. So question speaks about the critical data that needs to be resumed after the business interruption. Okay. So if you look for the options, service delivery objective means the level of service that you carry on in the offsite. Yeah. That is what is called as a service delivery objective, SDO. Interruption window is the time in which the system is not available. Yeah. For a temporary time period, there is a disturbance to the system where the system is not available. That is what is called as an interruption window, total time for disruption to the fill recovery. What is RTO? RTO refers to your downtime for the system. Yeah, how long the system can be down vis-a-vis where you need to start your operations in your offsite. When the question speaks specifically about the critical data, yeah, how much is the data that you can loosen at the time of disaster, which is related to your recovery point objective. You call it as maximum acceptable data loss, which is related to recovery point objective. So only when you are conceptually clear and able to distinguish between the others, you will be able to find the right answer. So D is the right answer for this question. Okay. Question number 6. Information systems auditor is performing an audit in the data center when the fire alarm begins sounding. The audit scope includes disaster recovery. So auditor observes that data center staff respond to the alarm. Which of the following is most important action for the data center staff to complete in this scenario? Notify the local fire department of the alarm condition. Prepare to activate the fire suppression system. Ensure that all the person in data center are evacuated. Remove all backup from the data center. Perfect. So, in such a case where human life is of utmost priority in your BCP DRP, right? So, that's the reason C is the right answer. So, that concept is very clear on it. All the person should be evacuated first, yeah, considering the other top priority. So, keyword here is on the most important action where we prioritize human life compared to all other backup or activation of the fire suppression system. Okay. So, here C is the right answer over here. Information systems auditor is reviewing enterprise controls related to email encryption. The enterprise policy states that all sent email must be encrypted to protect the confidentiality of the message because the enterprise shares non-public information through email. In a public key infrastructure implementation, properly configured to provide a confidentiality email is encrypted with sender's private key and decrypted with sender's public key, recipient's private key and decrypted with sender's private key, sender's private key decrypted with recipient private key, the recipient's public key and decrypted using recipient's private key. If you look for the question, this is where the expertise on your knowledge is required. If you look for this question is for encryption decryption as part of domain 5. There is a difference between encryption decryption and digitally signing the document. Here, as part of your PKI, as part of your encrypting the document, the intent is to maintain the confidentiality of the data where I have shared the data with the recipient and only the recipient is able to read the message. That is what is the primary intent. When I want to ensure that only the recipient is able to read the message, I need to use a private key, or the other person should use the private key to decrypt the same, because private keys are kept private, private keys are not shared, only the public keys are being shared with the third party. So in such a case where I want to ensure, I meaning I am the sender here, there is a recipient. Okay, I am sending a message to Pooja. I want to ensure only Pooja sees the message. Even the other people, they are able to see the message in between. Data should be encrypted, should not make any sense to them. So that is what is the intent of this encryption decryption. Okay, here when I want to ensure only Pooja is able to read the message, it should be decrypted by Pooja using her own private key. Okay, now when I want to encrypt the same attached to it, what I need to do? I need to encrypt using Pooja's public key, which is receiver's public key. So for encryption, you will use the receiver's public key. For decryption, you will be using receiver's private key to decrypt. There is a thin line of difference on usage of the keys for digital signature and for encryption decryption. Okay, so here D is the right answer over here. So this is a concept which you need to be very clear on, and then only you will be able to apply the same in the question. Okay, so D is the right answer here. Now moving to the next question. Encryption decryption is a language, or it is a methodology that is used to ensure protection of the data. Okay, so ensure that data is protected in a manner that even if it is being read in between, yeah, or wire taped in between, you are not able to understand, yeah, understand the message that is being sent. So there is a sender who is sending the message to the receiver. Okay, and this message is encrypted and then sent to the receiver. So receiver decrypts this message. Okay, now what is the intent here? Only the receiver should see the message. So if you want receiver only to see the message, it means he should be using his own private key to decrypt. Right, till that concept clear? When I want to ensure that only the specific Zoom user is able to understand or read the message, it should be decrypted using your private key. When a person uses a private key, it is only that person is using the same, because it is not shareable. Right? On vice versa, it works as a pair. When you use the receiver's private key to decrypt, so the other way around, the key pair mechanism works is that public key of the receiver is used to decrypt or encrypt the same. Okay, this is what is a concept related to your encryption decryption on usage of the key. It works on a thumb rule, yeah, where it works as a pair, like your lock and key. You cannot use my own key to unlock your lock. It will not work. It should work as a pair. So a private key and public key of a single person only to be used for a encryption or a decryption. It is per person's key is only used, and private keys are kept private. Public keys can be shareable. Okay, that is the thumb rule that is used in the PKI. And now, as part of encryption, when you want to ensure confidentiality of the data that you send to the right person, you mean it in the security terms as authenticity of the receiver is being evaluated. We use decrypting is used using the receiver's private key and encrypted using the receiver's public key. Clear? So this is what is related to the cycle related to encryption and decryption. Okay. Now, moving to the next question. A cryptographic hash sum of the message is recalculated by the receiver. This is to ensure that confidentiality of the message, non-repetition by the sender, authenticity of the message, integrity of data transmitted by the sender. Great. I can see the option D. D is the right answer here, which is on integrity of data. The hash value of data, the hashing is primarily used to protect the data from being edited or modified during the transit. Okay, that's why you hash the data. That is a concept related to information security, which is called as hashing, to protect that the data is not modified or deleted or edited during transit. You hash the value. Okay, so that is what is called as integrity of data transmitted over the sender, not confidentiality. For confidentiality, you use the keys, public and private key. Non-repudiation is on using the digital signatures ensure non-repudiation as well on the authenticity. Okay, digital signatures, the primary intent is to maintain authenticity and non-repudiation. Here the concept is on hashing. Hashing ensures integrity of the data. Yes, so man in the middle attack data protection is related to your hashing. Okay, so concept of hashing is what is tested here. So D is the right answer here. So if you look for it, we have understood all the options, yeah, with the explanation. So we understood all the options. So you are conceptually clear on the option, why we are eliminating on the other options. Okay. Okay, probably this is a repetition of the question. Next question. A perpetuator looking to gain access to gather information about encrypted data being transmitted over the network would most likely use eavesdropping, spoofing, traffic analysis, masquerading. Yes. Can you look for the options? You have answered A, B, and C, right? So here you need to understand the differentiation between a passive attack and an active attack. Here it is not an active attack. A perpetuator looking to gain access. Launch of an attack did not happen here. The launch of an attack is what is called as an active attack, like your man in the middle attack or your phishing attack or ransomware attack. All these are the active attack where the attack happens. This is looking to gain access, where it is more of an observation, analyzing how the traffic is on, which is a passive attack. Yeah. So here, if you look for the options, other A, B, and D looks out where there are active attacks, actual launch of an attack. Only traffic analysis is related to your passive attack, which is on doing an analysis. Yeah. Who is looking to gain access? That is the keyword in the option. Okay, that's the reason traffic analysis is the right answer here. So you need to your if the question speaks directly about what is the passive attack from the below options, people would have answered it the same. But here it is more tricky on understanding perpetuator looking to gain access. So you need to look for that this hacker is trying to hack the system, actually not hacking. Okay, so that is what is the keyword over here, which is related to your traffic analysis. Okay, so that's the reason C is the right answer here. Okay. One last question. During a logical access control review, an information systems auditor, yeah, observes that user accounts are shared. The greatest risk resulting from this situation is that unauthorized user maybe use the shared ID to gain access. User access management is time consuming. User accountability is not established. Passwords are easily guessed. This is part of domain 5 again, which is related to your shared ID usage. Yeah. So here accountability cannot be established. We discussed prior as well on a question, right, related to shared IDs. In an organization where the shared IDs are used, the organization should have established proper control in place in identifying who is the person who has made the change. So unless otherwise they are not established, then the accountability cannot be done. Who has made the change cannot be established. So even in the case of a shared ID, proper control needs to be established by the organization to identify the specific person who has made a change or addition to the data. Okay, so the primary control for a shared ID is related to user accountability needs to be established. So C is the right answer here. Others are as well a risk, but the question speaks about the greatest risk. The primary risk of related to a shared ID is on to establish an accountability. Okay, so that is not taken care here. So that is why user accountability cannot be established or is not established is the right answer over here. So for this, you need to understand what is the primary risk of using a shared ID. So this is how the questions will not be direct, but it will be giving a scenario and you need to apply on the same. Yeah. So we have discussed fairly around 10 questions.